the First Lady of Kettering Medical Center, First Lady of Kettering. I think that would be the way to say it. A person that I met for the first time within the last 8 or 9 months and have found to be that warm, personable human being that I had heard she was. And so I'm delighted to present to you Mrs. Virginia Kettering. Mrs. Kettering?
Can you hear me, or would you rather I use the mic?
Do we need the mic? All right, they'd rather you use it.
All right. Well, I know I've added a few years, but I didn't know I was that old enough to be the first.
I can say the oldest.
All right. But it takes a few years to be that, you know, in this community. But when I walked in this morning, I couldn't believe that everyone in this room was a member of the faculty. Because when I first knew this school, I don't suppose I dare say how many there were, but I just really am awed, and still I shouldn't have been, because each time a new class came in and I saw those numbers. You see, when the school was first built, there were no outsiders. Everyone was a resident of that school, and it was basically nursing. So it was quite a small group. You felt you knew absolutely every student. And many of the students, we were living up on the hill at that time, and many of the students would drift up. We hoped that they would pick the flowers whenever they were out, whatever they wanted, because everyone knows the more you pick, the more they bloom. And in that way, we did come acquainted with so many of the students and loved it. But as the years have gone on, all of that has changed. And I suppose you sacrifice quite a bit when something grows and grows and grows. But those sacrifices are absolutely necessary, and we pick up other advantages in place of them. But as I think back, I was asked to tell you about the school as it was when it first began, and as I remember it. And I remember going in, seeing all the rooms and where the students were to live, just exactly what we were to have in the way of furniture and the furnishings. A piano was a must. That was the first requirement, it seemed. Well, someone in the community was very generous, and when they heard we needed a piano, it came forth. And I often wonder if you still have that same piano. I can't remember. Would you know? Is it still there?
I'm told. I don't remember.
There were all kinds of things of that sort. And Mrs. Chase, how many of you knew Mrs. Chase? Well, then you know of whom I'm speaking. Mrs. Chase taught me absolutely everything I know about hospitals, everything I know about schools of nursing, but I can't say that I know very much about the school as it is today. Now, of course, I have renewed interest and also curiosity, because I just wonder where in the world you put all these students. It seemed to me at the time it was crowded, but how many are from the community and do not live at the school?
We have about 160 in the dormitory.
160 in the dorm.
So there are 300 that are
Oh,
in the community.
well, you see, I really need to come back and be re-educated. Well, quietly. But as I think back, and it was different. Do you want to hear this? We saw much more of the student nurses. Now, I hope I don't bore you, but it was the student nurses we saw in those days. And then as the years have gone along, more and more of the other students. But the nurses were on the floors, the nurses were there The nurses were those who were feeding the patients who were unable to feed themselves. Many of the student nurses brought in the trays. It was much more of a family life. If you were a patient in the hospital, when you left, you felt you knew the students. Now you question, do you or don't you know the students? And of course, the nurses, we can tell from their uniforms, but the others, we don't know whether you're students or you are full-time or just, well, I shouldn't say you, but the students. There was a very, very close tie. And when I asked the other day why we didn't see more of the students, then I was told how important it is, and because of the shortening of time a patient is in the hospital, there are so many services to be covered that there just isn't time for this socializing. And there again, you question many times, is this what we want? Or maybe we don't want it, but it's what has been handed to us and what we must accept. Now maybe I'm not being fair at this point, and I've been in many, many hospitals, but nowhere have, even now, in all the rush that we're going through, do you find the intimacy and the true concern that you find, I feel, in this hospital. I go back to Hinsdale frequently. I have friends in the hospital there, and the same feeling exists, which makes me feel that it is still the Adventist hospitals that are giving these services. And I just hope that we're not going to become so busy that we can't remember some of those things. It means more and more to the patients every day, and with all the pressure that people meet. I have friends who feel that just being a patient in the hospital is just a vacation because of the peacefulness and the happiness that they feel when they are there within those four walls. And if you can just pass this on to the students, it will continue, and it will help more than you have any idea in selling this hospital to the community. Have many of you heard these same comments? May I see the hands? Well, you know what I'm trying to say then, because this is still to me what makes the hospital great. And when we first came to Dayton, told people we wanted an Adventist hospital, they wanted to know, who are the Adventists? Why do you feel the way you do? Well, we lived through a polio epidemic in Hinsdale that was very, very tragic. There were 13 children off our swimming team alone who were patients at that time. And it hit just the 13 were patients within 36 hours. And we actually saw the nurses carry those patients up the steps. There was one funny little elevator. No one here will remember the old Hinsdale Hospital. But there was a birdcage elevator, and it traveled very slowly. And many a father carried his own child up the steps, because by this time the hospital had turned over a whole wing to us. They realized what was happening. The city of Chicago, Dr. Bundenson at that time, sent 2 nurses who had had training in the Sister Kenny treatments, and they came in. Everyone volunteered. We had so many volunteers, we had so much food coming in. The people of Hinsdale even brought food to our house. In those days, we were really petrified. We were afraid, and no mother with children under 16 was permitted to volunteer at the hospital at that time. They felt it was very contagious. So the food was brought to our house and then taken over so that the nurses could stay right on the floor and not leave. They had all their meals there. And as a result of the management of the hospital at that time, the citizens had called a meeting and money was raised. And have any of you seen the Hinsdale Hospital? It's perfectly lovely. And that was why we felt when we came to Dayton that we certainly wanted the church to take over this hospital. NCR and General Motors, when we contacted them, there was no question in their minds, and I don't know how many of you know this, but that NCR uses your hospitals all over the world, wherever possible, and also General Motors. And to me, that's a tremendous recommendation. And it's just that I hope and pray that it will never change. And it isn't quite fair to put this responsibility on your shoulders. But I feel that it's the way the young are trained as to just what will happen in our hospitals. And there's all the difference in the world. And I'm not recommending that you go to any other to find out, but it is interesting to visit the other hospitals, and you can sense the difference, and you feel it immediately. Are there any questions anyone would like to ask?
Mrs. Kettering, may I ask a question? Why a college to the hospital?
Well, I don't suppose many of you know, but I grew up in a so-called co-op school existence. And Moraine School, which was over here where the Moraine Club is, was co-op. Even in high school, our co-oping was done right within our own school. Then, of course, Antioch was the forerunner of Moraine. And we as a family have all been firm believers that it's the practical education that you acquire along with your book knowledge. And when you receive your diploma, you are ready to go to work rather than going out hunting that job for the first year in order to get your practical education. And you're on the ground floor. And here again, it does seem to me, are there any other hospitals that you know of where they do have a school of this type in conjunction with the hospital?
Not an Adventist hospital, but I've heard of one of in either Wisconsin or Minnesota that just was a situation, so you know what I heard.
St. Mary's College in Minneapolis is tied in with Fairview Hospital, very parallel to this, but it's not very common. That's the only one that I know specifically.
Of course, I think our new Wright State Medical School is coming along in that vein very rapidly. Is Henry Ford Hospital, are they doing any of it now? They used to.
They used to. I was just talking with a fellow from Henry Ford, since you and I talked
Yes.
a week ago. I bumped into a guy who had just been there, and I tried to find out what they were doing, and he didn't know anything about any of the co-oping type activities, so apparently
They've eliminated. Well, when Henry Ford was living, and also Dr. McClure, you see how I really am old, there's no doubt about it, but it's been an interesting few years. But to me, you almost have to be, well, I don't see how you could be teaching here and not be just very, very proud and very, very enthusiastic about what you are doing.
Okay, one of the first things that I got involved with you and Gene on was some of the long-range planning, and Gene told the group at one of the first meetings that we had done at the Marine on a Sunday morning breakfast, he believed in working, he believed in co-op, work and play ought to go together. Heavy on the work.
Yes, but also, I could remember the men in the family saying that you should never take a job that was work to you, that you should love what you were doing, and then you would have no regrets and no problems.
How, when he had originally talked with George Nelson, how that they really wanted to have a educational program, a research program, as well as just clinical service. That those three aspects were the fundamental ingredients to any kind of a real quality program. I think you could probably comment a little bit about the research activities, maybe some of the early stuff about Cox Heart Institute and how that research was an early part of the heritage of the enterprise.
Well, that came along almost at the, really about the same time that Gene had his first attack and met Cooley. And of course, after you go through that hospital and you see how research is working there every second of the day in the operating rooms, everywhere, it's research first, and I suppose Baylor the same way. And Doug Talbot wanted desperately to have this heart institute here. And it was Dr. Cooley who was instrumental in setting up the department here at this hospital. And he came on, he brought his artificial heart here. He and Gene had planned it, and it was planned, the date was set, and Gene died 2 weeks before. But Dr. Cooley said if everyone wanted him, well, after all, it was what Gene wanted and had planned. So Dr. Cooley came on and he brought his artificial heart. And you all, every one of you in this room, would have loved that day. It was really quite a day. And this is going way back. And Donahue, in those days, just was practically beating down the front door to see Dr. Cooley and to have an interview. And Dr. Cooley said, of course. So they came in with all their cameras, and Donahue, as we know Donahue today, the first artificial heart. And these were just many of the things. Dr. Bunsen was another one. He was in charge of the Chicago Health Department. He was concerned about the incubators, that there were so many deaths in the incubator, from incubator babies. And they discovered that it was the humidity that was collecting. So they put in small dehumidifiers in the incubators, and that immediately prevented the number of cases, decreased the pneumonia cases. All of these things were coming along all at one time, and Gene felt that the hospital was the place not to turn its back on research, but to accept research and to be ready for it and be looking for it. And I think that this is what you have done here. And all the way through this hospital, it's been one department after another when you think of it. Back. with very little fanfare, which is always helpful. And up on the hill, I'm sorry that we aren't living up there, but it was just great to have the students up there, to go through the house and give them an idea of the first air conditioning and how it was used and how it was constructed. But all of these things were done in a very, very simple way. But if those walls could talk, it would be marvelous, be a bestseller.
Are there other questions? I would just like to comment. One of the faculty have been here since the very beginning and remember these.
Oh, I wanted to ask that.
And how much I still remember your Christmas tree and how much we enjoyed Christmas up on the hill.
Wasn't it fun?
And your husband enjoyed so much showing us his planes and his Johnny House.
Yes.
I still remember, and the one thing I remember the most is my wife is quite a lover of cats, and you even had your nice cat run, and I thought that was really clever.
And the cat was fed right there. That was Mr. Carmelini. And Mr. Carmelini was an Abyssinian cat who came here on Father Kettering's 80th birthday. What to do with a cat with all these hundreds of people? No one knew. So the cat was put in my bedroom, and I fell heir to the cat. But Mr. Carmelini turned out to be Jean's cat, and that's the one I'm sure you're speaking of, and would eat as beautifully off a fork as any person could. As a matter of fact, the day of the opening of the hospital, he had his picture in the paper at lunch eating with a fork. And then we've always had such fun with the organ.
Yes.
Do you use that very much?
Yes, in fact, I have told you, we had somebody, and right now I forget who it was, that was here for an organ concert, and somebody helped me out here. And he stayed up at the Ridgely Terrace. And he sent us something from their files. This guy was from Purdue, I think. Does anybody else remember this? I just saw it, I've been so busy I didn't spend very much time. But he had some files of that original organ when it was moved from about 16 ranks to 48 ranks or something like that. And he was a connoisseur of organs of that vintage. And he wrote us a long letter and sent us some of the early documents that I don't know how he had gotten them, but he sent them to us. And we just put them in the archive file about 3 weeks ago. And I think this happened just before I left on vacation. I just barely saw it. And said, we have to save that. It has Charles Kettering's signature on the letter authorizing the change. Now, the organ originally was down in the basement. Part of the organ.
Well, if
Next to the pool. And when it was moved from there up to the attic, this letter authorized it. And the sentence structure of the letter is excellent. There are about 4 words per sentence in there. The letter is composed of about 3 sentences. Okay? I have never seen anything more distinct and solving a problem quicker.
well, and sometime when you go over, notice the ceilings and the sound. It comes from the ceiling. Then also out on that little solarium, there was sound there, and they brought that through the basement. But we had problems out there, and after all, we had all these animals, and we had children and Christmas trees. So we closed it, because that was used to throw the sound into the garden, and Mother Kettering used to have concerts up there when she would play, and the public was invited. So if anyone is ambitious, you might just come up and chip out some of the tile, and we'll show you where, and have a concert in the garden. But it is a fun house, and being the first house ever to be air-conditioned is interesting. And you, there again, closing doors and whatnot.
When we first opened up, some of you know I was in charge of patient services, and that included the front information desk. And when we only had a dozen patients, it didn't take very long for the census to grow. But anyway,
We always said business was good when we drove by and saw more lights. Now, don't tell that outside.
I walked out in the front lobby one day. We hadn't been open over maybe a month. And here was a gentleman seated in the front lobby looking at Charles F. Kettering's picture. And he was seated there almost in awe. And I looked at him and I thought, I bet that guy must have known Boss Cat. So I walked up to him. And I told him who I was, asked him if I could do anything. I saw he was looking at Mr. Kettering's picture. Oh, yes, he said, Mr. Kettering was such a wonderful man. He said, in fact, when he got ready to build his home, he wanted to have native stone from the area. And he put an ad in the paper that he would send out a flat car to anybody that would load it up with stone for the building of Grizzly Terrace. Now I said, if you go up there and you look on this certain corner and said you'll find some certain stone and that came from my field. And apparently the people who shipped stone in knew where their stone was, and he was as proud as anything that he had had a part. And Boss Cat just welcomed these kinds of people, as I perceived. It was kind of a big family.
Yes, and also the people who laid that stone. And they came back many a time, and they would bring their children, their grandchildren back. But in those days, it was unusual to see something of this sort. And being a Marine was equally, and I was always grateful when Dad was there, because he had always had marvelous stories to tell, and he could make anything interesting. He always had a few little bits bad. But you really, if you ever come up to the house, see if we can't find someone who could take you through and show you some of the interesting things. You really should see the attic. It's so full of pipes, just a room that you can scarcely move in.
Some of the group probably has not heard the story about when Mr. Kettering was down at the Winter's Bank. There were the runs on the banks, how he stood and asked folks really why they were there, if they really needed some money. I can tell you, I'm sure that some of these folks had never, they probably haven't read the history books about the Depression and the runs on the banks.
Oh, you're all so young. Well, it was the night before, we knew that one Dayton bank had folded and others were about to. And Gene and I lived out in Lakewood, Cleveland. And about midnight, Dad called and said, "Mutt, could you be in Dayton? By the time the bank opens in the morning, we expect to run on it." Well, you can imagine how we felt. Gene said, "Sure. And I can get there. I'll start out right away." And that's exactly what he did. But before he hung up, Dad explained to him, he said, "Now don't worry. because we're expecting money in here momentarily, and it will be here, and everyone will be taken care of. So Jean left, drove all night, got there in time, and it was a good 6-hour drive from Detroit in those days. He got to the bank. Dad was already there. They were ready. And Jean said that people had lined up. Some had come before daylight, so fearful that they wouldn't get their money. So Dad stood at one door as they came in and greeted everyone, said good morning to them, asked them where their window might be, if he could help them. And they would take their money out, go through the bank, out and out the back door, and Jean would say goodbye to them and hope to see them again. Saw lots and lots of his friends, and joshed and said, it's safe. If you want to go back, go on around and put it back in. Over 50% of the people walked right around the corner and came back into the bank and deposited their money. When they realized it was theirs, for them, that's all that was necessary, and it was just the psychology of it. And there's a mention in, I read just this morning, in something in yesterday's mail telling that story. So I still, even though Dad was my father-in-law, I'm still very, very proud of him. And I'm so proud. I'm also proud of the hospital that carries his name. And I know he would be proud. He helped us with the hospital in Hinsdale. And that was another reason we felt so strongly that in his memory, rather than a monument, because we've never been a family of just granite monuments. We've, here again, felt that whatever that monument was, it had to work. And I can think of nothing that would make Dad happier than to see this hospital. With the school, he was a firm, firm believer in education. He taught school until the day that he was dismissed. He was fired bodily because the first steam engine was coming through Loudonville, or close to Loudonville, and it was a one-room schoolhouse, so he just dismissed the whole school. But he took the whole school with him, the class, and they went on to see the steam locomotive. And when the minister in the little village of Loudonville heard what he had done, he immediately saw to it, because he insisted that the steam engine was the work of the devil. And so Charles Kettering was fired right on the spot.
Field trips were dangerous, weren't they?
But it's just another part, and I don't think that has ever reached any of the authors who have written about Dad. But Dayton can be very proud of many, many, and I think they can add the hospital and the school now to all of the accomplishments.
Mrs. Kettering, I want to say before that applause, which you have, Mrs. Kettering has invited freshman students up to Ridgely Terrace this fall. We're arranging with her secretary for 2 different dates because of the size of the freshman class, and we'll reinstitute that visit that you were talking about, and you'll get a chance to meet with them.
Fun.